They're going to have a good neighbor for a matter of weeks and sometimes months, and in some cases longer than that. We're also looking at flexibility in terms of where students will be able to enroll, because we understand that families and the community is in flux in terms of where they're living, so flexibility on enrollment will also be a key for us. But underlying all of these decisions is the notion that we will not compromise the safety of either staff or students. I need to tell you that our teams began immediately to develop a plan for this school year. And as you know, in a timely manner, we announced that we were going to delay for a week and then for 2 weeks. We have focused on prioritizing schools from the least severely impacted to the most severely impacted, and then developing a system for how we're going to get those schools back online. I need to tell you that of all of our school campuses and many of our facilities, there is not one facility that was not impacted to some degree by Hurricane Harvey and its aftermath as well. Some of them were minimal, which constitutes cleaning up, drying off, wiping down, and some of those of schools that are impacted are much, much more severe. In fact, some of those schools will probably not open for the rest of this school year. With that said, we are conducting, and we have conducted and will continue to conduct air quality tests in all of our schools to ensure that the air quality is a safe air quality for our students and our staff. We are prepared to buy industry equipment as needed to address individual safety issues at each of our campuses if they are determined to be necessary as well. We will continue to monitor air quality as one of the major areas for safety as we go through this particular school year. Construction companies have already been identified, and work has already begun at 215 campuses in the Houston Independent School District. Our plan is to ensure that all schools are open at the latest by September 25th. And one of the biggest lessons learned during this devastating event is that we have to be patient and we have to be flexible. You're going to hear flexibility quite a bit in our comments. With that said, we plan to implement rolling start dates for the opening of schools. As of today, the rolling start dates, as I've mentioned, are on Monday, September 11th, Monday, September 18th, and Monday, September 25th. I can report that out of our total of 284 schools, 202 schools will be ready to start on Monday, September 11th. Now, what we're not going to do is give you a list right now of those 202 schools. By 5 o'clock this afternoon, we will issue a press release, but we will also post on our website the list of those schools, because we are adding schools almost by the hour as crews are certifying that they're clean, safe, and secure. It's also important to note that 73 schools are awaiting those final designations, where we have folks in those schools making those determinations, safe, secure, and ready to go. Today, by this evening, as I mentioned, facilities will have completed more assessments, and an updated list of schools will be ready, and their opening dates will be posted as well. Our school principals will confirm with their teachers if they need to report to school tomorrow. And if a school is not cleared, then the principals will inform their teachers where they will report to. That is important because we know that Hurricane Harvey hit the week before school was supposed to start. And in many cases where there's been damage, teachers need a day to come in and clean, not necessarily clean, but rearrange their rooms and get it ready for students. So whatever day we start in the rolling start, teachers will have a work day to prepare to receive students when they come back. Teachers whose campuses are opening on September 11th will report to school tomorrow, Friday, September 8th, for a work day. On Monday, September 11th, all teachers from schools that are not clear will report to a central site for crisis and trauma training. Principals will notify those teachers of any additional details. Now, this is an important part of our preparation as we receive students back into our school system. We know that many of our students have witnessed trauma. Many of our students have been exposed to trauma by the sheer nature of the catastrophe that happened with Hurricane Harvey. Therefore, we have training that all of our teachers over the first quarter of this school year will be trained in to assist students in the reintegration into a regular school day. We're going to take advantage of the fact that not all schools will come online right on September 11th, and those teachers whose campuses will open later will be the first to be trained in preparation for receiving their students, and then we will rotate teachers through the training so that they have some training on how to structure curriculum, structure events, and structure supports for students that have experienced trauma. So a little specific about some of the schools that will have to be relocated. We have 9 campuses that will have to be relocated to new locations or attend nearby underutilized campuses. The start dates for all of these 9 schools will be September 25th. And again, principals will be notifying their teachers. We will be notifying by text and by phone call the families in these schools. These are the schools that we would say are the most extremely impacted schools in our district. And they are Scarborough Elementary School, Hilliard Elementary School, Robinson Elementary School, Mitchell Elementary School, Coulter Elementary School, Brayburn Elementary School, Askew Elementary School, Burbank Middle School, and Liberty High School. We'll have those dates available for you as well. We're working to ensure that students can attend as soon as possible, as long as those school sites meet the criteria that we've talked about for safety, cleanliness, and security. We will continue to provide updates in the aftermath of the storm, and we encourage parents to visit HoustonISD.org/Harvey for additional updated lists of resources and news. And you can follow us at HoustonISD.org, Facebook.com/HoustonISD, and Twitter.com/HoustonISD for up-to-the-minute updates, and opt in for text messaging by texting yes to the number 68453. Now, what's important to note is that campus principals will also be calling parents. Information will continue to flow on these campuses, and as I've mentioned, this is a free-flowing event. So by the hour, there are more and more schools that are being cleared. So it's important that people are able to keep up with that information as we provide it. We understand that parents and students might have a lot of questions, so we've created a frequently asked questions list, an FAQ, and answers addressing our community employee concerns. And you can find that online, again, at HoustonISD.org. We've also received a lot of support from our community through donations and volunteer efforts, and we want to thank everyone who has outreached to Houston ISD to support our students and community. The need has not yet ended, and if you want to help, you can also visit our website for opportunities to either volunteer or to donate unused clothing for students, or if you want to make a monetary donation, you can do that as well. Additionally, we have information online, and you can call a phone line, which is 713-556-6005. Again, I want to reiterate that at this time we anticipate having all of our schools, all 283 schools, open by September 25th. And don't forget that we will relax the uniform policy. So for students that are worried about the uniform, if you have the uniform, go ahead and wear it. But if you don't have the uniform, haven't yet purchased the uniform, no one will face any consequences for not being in school uniform. The uniform policy is relaxed. We also have a list of sites that was just published where we will be distributing uniforms across the city this Friday, tomorrow, and on Saturday tomorrow as well. We are working to add additional sites as more and more of those uniforms become available. So be sure to check our website as well. I would also mention that through this weekend, through Sunday, there are 9 community sites based in our schools where we are feeding the community breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That will continue through this Sunday. And once students are back in school on Monday, September 11th, all students, regardless of economic status, will receive breakfast, lunch, and dinner free of charge for the entire school year as we go forward. We know that people want to know specific schools. We would stay here for about an hour reading those 202 schools, and it would be obsolete as soon as we get to the last school because they're adding them and we're adding them as we go. So we're going to encourage you again to log onto our website. But the message is clear. For 202 schools as of this press conference, you do start school on Monday, September 11th. And for teachers in those 202 schools, you do report to your school site tomorrow on Friday, September 8th. You will be in touch with your school community as the rolling start starts for schools that have not yet been cleared as safe, secure, and ready to go. With that, I would be remiss if on behalf of our board and our entire school district, having passed through Hurricane Harvey and its after effects, one of the biggest storms that we've weathered here in Houston, if we did not say to our colleagues and our friends and everybody in the Miami-Dade school district and the school districts in Florida that our thoughts and our prayers are with you as you prepare for this storm that's coming your way, Hurricane Irma. But we are ready to assist you even as we're rebuilding here in Houston, because that's just what we do in Houston. So with that, we'd be happy to take whatever questions you may have. Sure. Muchísimas gracias. I may not do the whole thing, okay, pero en español. Muchísimas gracias a todos por estar aquí. Como ya saben, la tormenta Harvey, el huracán Harvey, fue uno de los eventos más impactantes en nuestra ciudad de Houston, en nuestro estado de Texas. Sin embargo, hemos estado trabajando duro y casi 24 horas al día para preparar a nuestras escuelas a recibir a nuestros estudiantes. Como se ha publicado, el día lunes 11 de septiembre será el primer día de escuela para nuestros estudiantes en el distrito escolar. Sin embargo, casi 280 planteles de escuela en nuestro portafolio de escuelas en Houston HISD. Sin embargo, 202 de esos planteles estarán listos para recibir a nuestros estudiantes el día lunes 11 de septiembre. Sin embargo, en esos mismos 202 planteles, mañana viernes 8 de septiembre será el primer día para regreso de maestros y los empleados de ese edificio para que vuelvan a trabajar. La cuestión es qué pasa con los otros planteles y las otras escuelas. Para 5 de la tarde hoy en nuestro sitio de web www.houstonISD.org vamos a tener la lista de escuelas que sí empiezan ya el día 11 de septiembre y también hay que monitorear ese sitio porque vamos a estar anunciando cuándo van a venir otra vez las escuelas que todavía no están listas. Quiero reenfatizar con toda nuestra comunidad que es importantísimo que las escuelas sean seguras, que sean limpias y que estén listos para recibir a estudiantes y a los adultos en esos planteles. Por eso es que todas las 282 escuelas no van a abrir el lunes. Queremos asegurar que son seguros, que son lugares en donde son dignos para que vuelvan los estudiantes a estudiar. Entonces, estén por favor comunicándose con sus administración en sus planteles de escuela. También es importante que estén en contacto con nosotros por las redes de medio social como el red de internet, Facebook, Twitter y también el número de teléfono que tenemos para textos para esa información. Es importante también que anuncie que hay 9 planteles que no van a poder abrir hasta por lo menos el 25 de septiembre, lunes 25 de septiembre. Esos 9 planteles son Scarborough Elementary, Hilliard Elementary, Robinson Elementary, Mitchell Elementary, Coulter Elementary, Brayburn Elementary, Askew Elementary, Burbank Middle School y Liberty High School. Esos 9 planteles no van a abrir hasta lo mínimo el día 25 de septiembre. Aparte de eso, hay que recordarles a la comunidad que el vestuario, el uniforme que se usa en las escuelas no será enforzado. Entonces queremos que vengan a la escuela. Si necesitan ayuda con uniforme o con ropa, se va a distribuir ropa para estudiantes mañana viernes y sábado. Durante el día, y tenemos esa información disponible en nuestro sitio del internet. También es importante recordar a la comunidad que hoy, el viernes, sábado y domingo, en 9 sitios por toda la ciudad, estamos sirviendo desayuno, lonche y cena para toda la comunidad absolutamente gratuitamente. Queremos invitarlos a que vengan este fin de semana, y también en cuanto empiece la escuela, todos los estudiantes en nuestro distrito escolar tendrán la oportunidad de obtener el almuerzo, el lonche y la cena absolutamente gratis este año escolar, sin importar si pueden pagar o no. Entonces queremos estar preparados para que cuando vuelvan nuestros estudiantes tengan un ambiente que sea digno para su estudio, pero que también sea un ambiente en donde los vamos a cuidar para que estén listos a estudiar. Happy to answer some questions.
Will you have to make up the time? Do you know yet?
So we've been in constant communication with the Texas Education Agency, and as of this point, we've been granted waivers for that time. But what we've also been talking internally in the Houston Independent School District is how we're going to work to make up some of that instructional time, because we want students to have as much instructional time as possible. So the conversations so far, we've been granted some waivers, but we're also having conversations. For example, our students will have lost 2 weeks of instructional time. So what will that do to the testing schedule? The STAR testing schedule is just one example. So more information will come. Our first priority right now, though, is getting students back in school and starting to establish a sense of normalcy. Laura?
Yes, Superintendent, can you tell us the plans for children who are staying in shelters like the George R. Brown and the NRG? And also, what for students, say, at those 9 schools, where do they go for the next 2 weeks?
So again, flexibility being the key as we go forward. So we have staff now that is working with the authorities at the shelters. A piece of good news is that many of the families that have been in the shelters now are starting to be placed in temporary housing outside of the shelters, which is a good thing. But for the families that are still at shelters, we're working with the authorities to identify who are the students that are HISD students. That information, to be honest, will be probably the most actionable by tomorrow in the afternoon. And then our plan is to have transportation that will be able to pick up students and transport students to school. In some cases, they may be transported to schools that perhaps aren't the home school, but are the closest school. In some cases, we will be able to get them to their home school. But again, we are relaxing a lot of those enrollment issues. We want students back in school. For students that in between, when the rolling starts, we are working right now with many of our community-based organizations and, quite frankly, with our teachers, because even teachers that have not been technically on the job for these last 2 weeks, we have many of our teachers that are out volunteering their time in the shelters and actually doing reading clubs and reading circles. So we are working very closely with our teachers union, and the plan is going to be that teachers that are not yet assigned to their school campus because the school campus isn't ready, we are, as I mentioned, going to have them meet in a central location, but we're working on a plan for having some kind of a interactive activity where teachers could actually bring some of those students in and have some kind of organized instructional program for them in the meantime. I can't give you the details now because obviously we're still working on those, but our plan is really to be available for students, even if their campus isn't ready, to have some kind of learning that can take place. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that, flexibility is just more than a word. So, for example, I had a conversation with one of our trustees who mentioned there's going to be some circumstances that may be very difficult. So, for example, we know that as parents and caregivers are going back to work, we know that there are some cases where the high school students, and you have high school, middle school, and elementary school students in the same home. The high school students are the caregivers. They're the babysitters while parents are going back to work. In those cases, for that high school student, if their school is back in session and the elementary school is not yet back in session because of the physical condition of the building. We are going to work with that student so that they don't lose credit. We're going to work with that student so that they get some work. We're going to work with that student so that it's not counted against them. And that's kind of the flexibility that's on our list to work with TEA around attendance issues and attendance matters. So we want to be as sensitive and responsive and flexible with our community as possible. But what's going to be very, very important for our community is to communicate with the school. The school has to know your circumstance, and once the school knows your circumstance, it'll allow us to respond to the school. And if I can just take 1 minute, because this is also a very important conversation that is happening in our communities. I want to be very clear that this Board of Education has by policy and on the record made it absolutely clear, and this administration is absolutely on the same page, that there is no student in Houston ISD that will ever be asked for their immigration status, will ever be asked for anything having to do with immigration or anything having to do with immigration. And the reason I mention that is I have personally been informed of many situations where when we've gone out and reached out to families are scared to interact with governmental agencies because of the fear that there may be some immigration backlash to those families. So I want to be very clear that we are here to help your students. We will never ask for immigration, proof of immigration status, and we are here to say that we want you, by the very fact that you live in Houston and in the Houston Independent School District, we want you in our schools. We're going to protect you in our schools. And I think that's so important. I'm going to say it in Spanish. Quiero asegurar a toda nuestra comunidad, porque hemos oído muchas historias de cuando vamos nosotros a ayudarles a familias, la familia tiene un temor, están aterrorizados porque una agencia del gobierno que supuestamente como el distrito es una, que le vamos a pedir comprobación o prueba de su estatus inmigratorio. Jamás nuestro distrito escolar y nuestra mesa directiva y esta administración jamás le vamos a pedir a ninguna familia, a ningún estudiante, jamás que tengan comprobación de su estatus inmigratorio. Estamos aquí para servir la comunidad, ustedes son nuestra comunidad y queremos que por favor trabajen con nosotros, que comuniquen con nosotros acerca de su circunstancia para que nosotros podamos con todo el esfuerzo del distrito apoyarlos y mantenerlos seguros aquí en nuestra ciudad.
What about those?
9 schools that, how many of those will be co-located somewhere, and with what campuses will they be?
So we're still working the details of the co-location. You know, co-location, it's kind of like the eHarmony, right? You don't just show up. So you have to make sure you have the space. You have to make sure that you... That was a joke. I've heard. But it's important that you have the right conditions. So not only the space conditions, but we're looking at location. Geographic proximity is really important as well. Some of these co-locations will be temporary co-locations until September 25th. But I can tell you that there's at least 3 of the schools that are on this school of 9, this list of 9 schools, where at this particular point, we do not envision being able to reopen those schools in their current location for the rest of this school year. That's how damaged those buildings are. I prefer to wait, and we can actually release that information.
And will you be looking at having students attending in shifts, or will you be looking at more of a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday?
Yeah, good question. And by the way, that caused a lot of Twitter traffic when we talked about shifts. So everybody needs to relax about the shifts. Lots of schools have done that. The situation that would require us to look at shifts is when you have large schools, like if you have a high school, for example, that is displaced. At this particular point, we don't envision having any of our high schools that will not be able to start. So if you did have a high school and you have thousands of students, that's when we would be looking at perhaps 2 shifts. At this point, we're not anticipating that. In fact, we don't have a high school in that situation right now. So the shift question is pretty much off of the table. But again, we hesitate on giving you locations because those details are still being worked out on these 9 schools.
What about families who are displaced but not at the shelters? Will there be transportation for those families?
So our principals have been phenomenal. And as principals are reaching out to their community, we're starting to gather information from principals about circumstances just like that, where families have been displaced. They're not in a shelter, but they're in an alternate location for residency. So as we can gather that information, then we're going to be able to respond appropriately, whether it's transportation or whether it's a temporary enrollment in a facility or a school that's closer to where they currently are. So we're still very much in information gathering phase around that particular issue.
Are there any cost estimates yet as to the damage at facilities and how much it's going to cost to repair them?
So the general working, I would say, guesstimate, because we're still gathering all of the costs, and this includes not only the costs of the actual damages to the school buildings, but also when you think about this, I need to give context to this. The day before Hurricane Harvey was to make landfall, we had already pre-positioned many of our assets centrally and in very strategic areas geographically across the district to be able to respond. But in addition, we had some heroic employees of the district in this very central building that slept here for 4 days and were available on call to be dispatched out. Most of them were our bus drivers, but many of our facilities folks as well, dispatched out to go help retrieve residents and take them to shelters or take them to safety. So there's a cost to that as well in terms of overtime and those kinds of things. So to answer your very simple question in a very long-winded way, our working number right now is about $700 million that Hurricane Harvey so far is impacting the Houston Independent School District.
Do you have any sense as to how you will even begin to pay for that, given the rainy day fund doesn't even cover half of that?
Well, you know, the state of Texas has a $10 billion rainy day fund. I don't know if anybody noticed, but it's been raining. So we're hoping that some of that will flow to the schools and school districts and municipalities that have been impacted by Hurricane Harvey. But obviously, we are working very closely with our insurance adjusters. We're working very closely with FEMA. In fact, in most of the sites where we're doing the comprehensive analysis of the facilities' readiness to come back, we've had actual FEMA personnel with us, ensuring that we're looking at the types of areas that they will eventually ask us to be able to prove if we have damages. So we have that federal assistance, we have our own insurance assistance, and then there is additional talk that the state of Texas may in fact help with some of this kind of I get the costs associated with Hurricane Harvey. But it is important to also note that in every circumstance over the last 15 years where we've been able to look at hurricane events or natural disaster events and what their impact has been on school systems, in every single one of those situations, the public school systems have been impacted negatively in terms of enrollment. And when we receive funding based on our enrollment, that becomes a critical issue, not only for HISD, but the 17 surrounding school districts in the greater Houston area. So that's also an area of conversation that we're having with the Texas Education Agency. And I anticipate that will become a bigger conversation also with the legislature and also with the executive branch in Texas.
How will the $700 million impact your future interactions in this district and the way you're going to get paid back?
So this is a critical issue for us. Our priority, and the board has been very clear that the first priority is to get school back in session in a safe and in a real way. But we don't want anybody to lose track of the fact that we still are writing a $200 million check in terms of recapture, Chapter 41 this year. Next year it'll be closer to 250, the following year 300. So this is important for us that we look at the totality of what's going to be flowing out in terms of resources for HISD, and that we have that very structured conversation about then how do we make the district at least whole or somewhat whole in terms of the expenditures that we're going to expend to get schools back in session. So the board has been very clear. We want safe schools, we want clean schools, we want secure schools. That's how we're operating now. But concomitant with the work to get the schools in order, we also are getting our financials very, very clear so that wherever we can make an insurance claim, we're going to make an insurance claim. Wherever we can make a FEMA claim, we're going to make a FEMA claim, and that we can reimburse to the taxpayers the resources that we've expended to get our schools back up and running through no fault of anyone except an act of God. Yes?
This question is looking forward to more as school gets going, but have there been any conversations with the Texas Education Agency about accountability and maybe some more flexibility on, the state testing and accountability system and everything there?
Yes, so I mentioned previously that's on a list of questions that we've already started to engage with the Texas Education Agency. I think that our colleagues in the Texas Education Agency are also wanting to have schools up and running, and then there will be a conversation around those particular questions. We know that some of our surrounding sister school districts in the greater Houston area have also put that on an agenda. The superintendents, the 17 of us, in fact, the entire Harris County delegation of superintendents, we have a nightly call where we're talking about those kinds of issues as well. So it's not like it's fallen off the agenda. I think the priority right now is how do we get back in school? And then based on when we actually get back in school, then we have some specific dates, specific information to engage in a conversation around some of those waivers, some of the accountability issues, etc.
Who is eligible for the breakfast lunch?
Every student, regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of their income, just by the fact they're an HISD student, they can get free breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
When does football start?
Where does football start? I think currently what we've agreed with all of our colleagues, it'll be next week. Next week is high school football. Pro football starts tonight.
Right. I meant high school.
Yeah.
You mentioned enrollment might be relaxed in some sense. Can you elaborate a little bit on what will happen and where students can go and how that will look?
Yeah, so again, we're not talking about a complete free-for-all, but what we are talking about is that student that is enrolled in elementary school A, but that student's family now has been dislocated from their home. They have no more home. They're living somewhere else across the city of Houston. So it's almost impossible for them to get to school A. They will be able to enroll in another school, and once their circumstance changes, they will still have their seat at school A. So that's the kind of flexibility that we're talking about.
How will you verify, or do you expect that there will be anything that will have to be done to ensure that people aren't doing that who weren't affected?
Well, yeah, I think we're gonna count on people's better angels in terms of how they're interacting with us on the enrollment issues. But there's multiple ways. I mean, most principals, most schools already know who their students are, and if they're dislocated, they know they've been dislocated. So there's going to be multiple ways of verifying where those are legitimate issues and where perhaps they may not be legitimate issues. But I think what we're saying is that there's going to be a greater sensitivity to those particular circumstances where the answer is not going to be you cannot do that, but instead tell me why you need to have that flexibility so that we can make decisions that are best for students and parents given the circumstances they've just passed through.
You mentioned communication. What is the best way for parents to communicate what their situation is?
Always, the best way to communicate is through the principal, through the school. So the school is the best place to communicate. The more information our principals have, the better they can communicate that to us in a centralized, systemic way, and the more that we can then do to support students and families out in the community. Okay, so again, just a quick recap. Today, 5 o'clock, we will have a posted list of all of the schools on our website that are open for business Monday, September 11th. That means for all of our teachers and counselors and support staff that are out there that are based in our schools, that means that your day back at your school site is tomorrow, Friday, September 8th. We will also have a list of schools that are not yet up. I've given you the names of 9. And once you know that, we're going to be communicating directly with you school by school as your school comes back online in that rolling start. Laura?
One more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you anticipate, given the damage at some of the more heavily damaged schools, that a school might be just permanently relocated and not reopened at all at the original site? Do you foresee that at all?
Well, that's a conversation that the board and I have to have, quite frankly. I think that there's always, as stewards of good financial stewards of the public's money, we have to look at the costs of rebuilding schools. And I will tell you that one of the conversations we're going to have at some point with the community is how do we rebuild some schools? I will tell you that of all of the bond schools of the 2012 bond that have just been finished and have just come online, not one of those schools sustained any kind of I would say even minor damage. I mean, they just had to clean up. So the schools that we are building are schools that are great schools in our community. They've been planned well, they've been positioned well, and they have withstood the most historically destructive hurricane and flood in Houston's history, and they've come through it great. Wouldn't we want that for every one of our 282 schools in our portfolio? So I think that's a conversation we will be having. But again, the focus now is to get students back to a sense of normalcy in our schools as soon as possible.
What was the number you gave for the schools that will start on Monday?
202. As of 20 minutes ago, 202. That may change. They're coming online as we go. We've got people out there working. Folks, thank you so much for coming, and thanks for all your help in getting information out.